Welcome to Schurtz and Ties, a podcast about education and culture. I'm Brian Miller.
And I'm Kasey Schurtz.
Kasey, my brother, this is another fantastic week hanging out with you. What are we chatting about today?
Well, I thought it was a great opportunity for us to really be critical of the job you're doing as a principal.
That's
And so I wanted to spend about an hour doing that. No,
Good.
what happened
But also get in line.
I'm glad I have scheduled time.
That's right.
No, but in seriousness, I had someone make a request, and I'm not going to name names just for the sake of all involved. I'm not going to say it was somebody from your building that sent me a message, but no, it definitely wasn't. But the request was this, which is they asked us to talk a little bit about the divide that often exists between administration and the staff. And while they didn't tell me exactly what they wanted us to talk about, I think it makes sense to approach it by discussing the divide, what it is, why it exists. And then, if we're good at our job, we'll also come up with some solutions.
Well, I can tell you the problem and the solution. The problem is teachers. The solution is listen to your boss.
I thought we had an episode once that said, don't listen to your principal.
Yeah, I think the topic that I brought was based off of a quote from Jed Hafer, which was the best teachers ignore their principals. And so I brought that to Jimmy Casas, and he said, no, that's not true. But if that is happening, it's all about trust. If they're ignoring you, it's because they don't trust you. And that's a you problem.
Yeah, that sounds right. So I think, did we solve this then? The principals have to be better?
Well, I know you're saying it with a smirk, but ultimately, and we both have some points that we're going to fine tune this a little bit. I think everyone's responsible, but ultimately the principal's responsible. So the answer to that simple question is yes. If there's chaos, if there's distrust in the building, it is mostly the principal's responsibility and fault.
I'm glad you said that second part too. Not just your responsibility. It is your fault.
It is. It is.
I think the answer is it has to be, because what's the alternative, right?
Yeah, well, maybe, but also anytime you assume a leadership role, you assume responsibility. And whether it be a coach, whether it be a parent, whatever it is, if you're going to sit in the chair that assumes leadership, then anything that happens in that building is your responsibility. And if it is going poorly, it is your fault. Now, I'm not saying 100% because we both know that's not true. But ultimately, if test scores are low, if something awful happens in your building, if whatever is the problem, at some point the finger points to the principal and saying, what did you do about it?
Yeah, and the thing is, even if it's not your fault, there's things you have to do to be better.
Sure.
To fix it anyway. But yeah, so let's get into it. Actually, I want to add one more detail to this. So I had a couple of people make requests of me. One was for this very specific topic, but one is similar to something that's frustrated you. Somebody told me to listen to one of those popular online principals.
Lamb.
And I'm not going to name who it is.
Am I right?
I'm not going to name who it is, but here's what I'll say.
Okay, press pause really quick, because I do think Principal Lamb is probably a decent guy. I do think he's causing an insane amount of division right now between principals and teachers, because he walks around and does these little videos. I get them all the time. And his reality of what he doesn't even work in public school.
Yeah.
So I think he's trying to be helpful, but he's a massive wedge right now.
So again, I'm not going to name names, but here's what I would say about some of those viral principles. They offer up something that, if you say something that teachers, because that's the majority of the profession, agree with and would celebrate, you're going to get a following. But a lot of these folks don't offer any substance to it. And very often they're saying something that is harmful. For example, research tells us that collective efficacy, a common belief by groups of teachers who are working together for the same purpose, is the most effective thing that we can do for our students. One of the systems we use to do that is through PLCs. Teachers hate PLCs because they're inefficient.
Yes.
And then you have a guy get on there and is like, my building doesn't have PLCs because I don't want to waste my teachers' time. How about do a better job of giving appropriate time to your teachers and teaching them how to use that time to
Didn't we actually have an episode on that? Stop canceling PD.
Yeah. And then, so you say that, and
I agree. Love it.
And I agree with him if your building is doing a shitty job in your PLCs, which most are. So he's not wrong necessarily.
I would say I would agree with him if your building is killing it. If you're ranked number one and you
Oh
need
yeah.
to cancel a PLC. Okay, you've earned it. If you have a shitty culture in a shitty building, you need 7 PLCs.
Well, and you just need to do it better.
You need to
And
do
then
it
he
better.
says, and then he touches on the other thing because we know
Who's
student
he
behavior.
again?
I mean, the people on TikTok or wherever they show up. The other thing that they often do is they just often touch on the emotional piece. For example, yeah, sometimes we got to kick kids out of class. I believe in consequences. What's your consequence, brother? The consequence is this student has to do the work we ask him to do. Don't just say, because what that teacher's hearing is, yeah, finally somebody that's willing to punish these kids, which let me go ahead and get into my first disconnect.
I was gonna say, is this a sacrificing of the lamb episode? What are we doing?
Oh man, can't. Maybe I don't know. Should we see if he'll come on?
He won't. And so one of my biggest criticisms of Principal Lamb, and again, I think he's probably a good guy. I think you and I probably would get along with him for the most part.
Yeah.
But he does do these things that I think are divisive, but he also does not respond to anyone who has a contrary opinion. And I have
Yeah.
multiple groups of friends who have tried
Yeah.
to reach out to him. I have reached out to him.
Yeah.
And he will not respond to anyone who does not applaud him.
Yeah. And I think the one thing that has to be understood is in a place that has a traditional setting with uninvolved parents or the normal difficult students, all of that, like he didn't succeed in that setting. He succeeded in a setting where
Where
you
he
get to
can
pick your,
kick kids out and kick him out of
where
his
you
building because
where you get to
can't.
pick your kids.
Yep. And
And
so here's my one defense of him because he gets a lot of criticism for school time using school for his videos. And so just maybe just to give him some grace or just to kind of get on the other coin of the side of the coin of defense for him. All of his videos are done after school hours. They're on weekends. His wife's recording. It is his own time. So he doesn't do it during where there are other principals that are celebrities that are doing everything on school time.
yeah.
So anyways, all
Well,
right, let's move on.
and yeah, again, I'm not naming any names in particular.
Principal Lamb.
Okay. But so here's my first thing. One reason I think again that folks like that succeed is because they know what teachers want to hear. And so they're supportive of what the teacher values, even if that value is not the best value. So I think the first reason I have that there's a disconnect between principals and teachers is they may actually have different values. And I think the common one is this. We have lots of teachers who want students to be punished. And so when a teacher asks for help from an administrator, what they're saying is, will you please punish this kid to the point that they'll stop behaving in this way? And I'll tell you right now, that's not a value I have. I'm not here to punish kids. I don't think most administrators are. And so if our value's different, then we're always going to feel this disconnect.
So I'm gonna broaden that slightly because I think it's a good example, but I'm gonna broaden it slightly that I think encapsulates one of the main reasons why there's division between staff or between a principal and staff. It's the difference of definition when it comes to accountability. And so you can talk about it with teachers and with students. When a teacher sends a student to the office, they want them to be held accountable. They oftentimes will use the word punish or consequence, but they want the student to be held accountable. I can tell you from the office that I sit in, I get data from my bosses telling me a breakdown because I have to submit all behaviors that we log, suspensions and all that kind of stuff. We log it and we provide it to our governing body of Montana. And then I get a data sheet of like, here's all the behaviors that you had to intervene on. And here's all your suspensions, ISS, OSS, whatever it might be. You need to bring these down. So I'm being held accountable by my bosses on how we handle behaviors. And I'm also being told, and rightfully so, you can't just punish kids. You can't kick them out of your building. You can't kick them out of your school. You can't kick them out of your classes because also I need your grades to improve, right? And kids' grades don't improve if they're not in your classrooms, if they're not learning. So this is why we're doing, at least in our school, this big push to do character habits, because believing if I can teach their character and I can teach them how to behave better, and we can spend time diving into how they behave in your classroom intentionally, we can change the behavior that gets rid of the consequence and they're in your sheets more. So I think I went very specific, but I'm gonna broaden it again, the difference of accountability, because teachers also want bad teachers held accountable, right? And they want the teacher who doesn't show up for bus duty held accountable, and they want the teacher who doesn't lesson plan on holiday, the couple days before holidays, held accountable. What that looks like, we don't really know, but they just want them held accountable. But when you go to that teacher and say, and you try and hold the teacher accountable, then there's suddenly a defense or an argument or a.
So I understand what you're saying, and I totally agree. I think that actually falls under my next example, which is different perspectives over different values. So let me try to parse the two a little bit.
Can I just stop really quick? Because I want to do that.
Sure.
What I just said was administrator to teacher, but that also applies to the administrator, where administrators feel the weight of accountability with students and with teachers. But when teachers come to the principal and want to hold the principal accountable, one of the greatest divides is when the principal gets defensive and the principal gets angry and the principal retaliates. That's a huge one. When the principal retaliates to a teacher who brings truth to their door and they suddenly, I think you
Yeah.
said you were given second period prep, right?
Yeah.
Or
Yeah.
or all the ways in which principals retaliate to teachers. That is also one of the greatest divides. And once that happens, then you have a desperately ineffective culture.
Yeah. By the way, quick story on that. Part of the second hour planning club became a clique, got real bad, divided staff and administration. That administrator eventually couldn't handle the staff anymore, left, and then eventually got pushed out of his next principal job. So
So you're saying that retaliation doesn't work?
I'm saying it's real harmful. It's harmful because now you're going to build these cliques of people
You're
close to
time
you.
for all the people that piss you off to
Yeah.
hang out.
All we do is hang out second hour and play at your demise. No, that's not quite how that happened. But if you are a vengeful person, I will tell you that eventually that's going to catch up with you because
Of course.
it just can't be the way we live. So one more second on the value thing here, because I think that's the point. You're talking about accountability, but I don't think that's what all teachers are saying. Like, yeah, they want them to be accountable to the expectation, but some of them, if you don't do this, I want you to feel the wrath. And most principals are not okay with that. The other thing that's true is when it comes to the relationship between the staff member and the administration, there's different values as well. Some people believe very much in a hierarchy and know your place. And I am the supervisor and you should listen to me. And that's also not healthy. And I think this was something I was going to mention a little bit later, and I probably will again, but I think that's why the onus really is on the administration to keep the communication open, to be approachable, because otherwise that hierarchy can deteriorate the relationship too, because you don't feel like you can talk to each other. So different values, as in the perspective of the moral and the spiritual guidance of the school might differ. But the other thing you mentioned then is different perspectives. And this is, I think accountability falls into this, because then the question becomes is whose role is it to solve the behavior? There are a lot of teachers who think it is up to the administration to fix the behavior. And that can't be true, can it?
Can I tell a really quick story?
Sure.
Is that okay?
Yeah.
My wife and I, when it was our second year of marriage. No, third year of marriage. I was still in school and we had just had our firstborn son, and we decided to take a job of being group home parents outside of Philadelphia. And we moved into a home with 6 teenage boys who they were either coming out of the juvenile system and it was their transition home, or it was their last kind of experience and chance before they went into the juvenile system. And so ages 13 to 17, we had these boys. And one of them, named JC, I talk about him a lot, actually share about his story quite a bit. Still have communication with him and this other kid, Kyrie, who we had on the show. So JC was so difficult. I've never experienced a more difficult child. And we kept calling our boss to come and help. And the boss would show up, and James, he would shape it up a little bit for the boss. They'd have this very, reconciliatory, if that's a word, conversation, whatever. And then within a couple hours or a couple days, JC would go back to his ways. We kept calling our boss. And one night, my wife and I were sitting there just absolutely frustrated. We can't keep doing this. And we both said, every time we call our boss, we defer our authority. JC doesn't trust us, but he also, we don't have any authority in this house. And that doesn't mean hammered hard fist, but we actually need to be the ones that deal with JC, as hard as it is. And so we committed to no longer calling our boss unless it was an absolute emergency. And it was awful for a while. And then it was a little less awful. And then it was a little less awful. And then and there was many stories in between, things that happened in between. But before JC left, he was our closest ally. He defended our son, when kids would accidentally like knock him over or get rowdy, he would step in and defend our son. When we had to leave, I had to leave one time for a late night class, and I would pull JC aside. Hey, I got to leave. My family's here. Protect my family. I mean, he became our closest ally. And so I share that story of, yes, ultimately it's the principal's responsibility for behaviors. But every time a teacher defers to the principal, they defer their authority, they defer their responsibility, they defer their ability to make relationships. It will be a very quick and easy now fix, but a destructive long-term fix.
So I'm going to say something, and I want to be careful on how I say it, because I have heard principals use the phrase, well, did you build a relationship?
Yep.
And that's not what I mean by this. But what I do mean is we are not trying to fix behaviors. We are trying to fix relationships. And then the behaviors improve with that. And we're trying to do it in a way that these young people will trust more relationships, and they will be more willing to behave in ways that are socially accepted. If it's the principal doing the work, then it is the relationship between the principal and the student that is being repaired. It is not the relationship between the teacher and the student. And so
So
that's where it has to happen.
So where is the breakdown then? I mean, I have an answer, but why then is it such a breakdown? Because it's probably one of the greatest wedges of trust and mistrust and frustration between teachers and administration. So where is the breakdown? Why is that causing a problem? I have an answer,
So
but I'm curious of what you would
yeah.
say.
So I'm gonna go ahead and get into my third reason for the disconnect. So the first one is the principals and teachers might have actual different values. The second one is they might have different perspectives, and that's not really tied to the values, but that they're just seeing the situation differently. The third is they might have the same frustrations. And so that principal I mentioned before that gave me the second hour planning, because I had opinions and shared them. Well, the worst moment we had, and it was one of those deals, and I've told this story before, but I'll just retell it now in case people have forgotten or skipped an episode. I've asked for help fewer with a student. In my 20 plus years, I asked for help fewer than 5 times, or let's say 5 times. 3 of those are either institutionalized or in prison now. I'm not sure about the other two. So pretty difficult kids. Well, this one kid, I sent him to the office. Again, this is a very rare thing. He threw a chair and it hit another kid. The place wasn't safe anymore. And this was a thing. I watched this kid. I could handle him mostly, but I watched this kid terrorizing the building. And I said, hey, this kid is terrorizing the building. I'm speaking on behalf of my colleagues, not on myself. And I brought that up. I sent it in an email and just said, hey, what can we do about this? Well, my principal then just in front of an office full of people just started talking about me and, calling me names and going on and on about me.
I
Well,
like them already.
yeah, I mean, well, one of the people in that space told me, it's like, hey, just wanted you to know, here's what he's saying, said in front of a lot of people. So I'm like, all right, I can handle this. Because I don't believe in hierarchy as peoples, right? We're all equal. I know he's my supervisor, but if you're going to start talking about me like that, I will figure it out. So I went to him. And, I was being all macho. He's like, close the door. I'm like, not a chance. They all get to hear this one too. And we start going after it. We're like, it's heated. It's not great. It's probably a low point in my professional life because I'm getting after a supervisor in a way I'm not okay with. I'm probably saying things I'm not okay with, but it was an emotional moment, right? Because we have those. And he was too. After about 40 minutes, he finally said, I don't know what to do either. Bingo. If he would have said that, if I'd have sent him an email and say, hey, this kid's terrorizing the school, I hate seeing my colleagues in this situation, starting to affect my space. And if he had just said, yeah, this is a tough case, not sure what to do, let's get a team of people together, let's figure this out. Love it. But he was unwilling to admit he also didn't know what to do. And I think that when we send kids to the office, and this is a common story, I'm sure there are viral principals who have an answer to this, those kids get sent back. The easy answer is don't send that kid back. Why is the principal sending that kid back? Well, different values. I'm not punishing the kid. We can have consequences. Different perspectives. I don't know why he's here. You haven't communicated that to me. I'm not the one who's supposed to solve this problem. But really why that principal probably sent that kid back is because that principal doesn't know what to do with that kid either.
Yeah, Todd Whitaker talked about that when in relation to teachers. He said principals don't go into bad teachers' classrooms because they don't know what to do. They don't know how to coach them.
Yep.
Right? If something goes wrong, they don't know how to solve the problem. You hit on a couple things that I want to talk about. I think one of the issues that you are describing is there isn't clear communication, or to use your dumb phrase, a clear system
Are we getting
of
into solutions now?
not yet,
Not yet.
but a clear system of like tier 1, tier 2, tier 3 when kids act this way. And I have a hard time creating these, and we just did it for our building, but I have a hard time because your black, white teachers will see this and say, this says this is tier 1, and tier 1 says you're going to do this. And right. And so that never works that way. But I would assume that a lot of schools and teachers feel frustrated of they don't know the clear systems of when a student behaves, what do we do? And they also don't have a clear system of understanding of when I send them to the office, here's what you're going to do. And then the third part of that system, which I think is a huge breakdown in trust between staff and students, and it's not anything that you're going to be shocked to hear, but that loop of communication, right? That there's no, like, the teachers sometimes aren't providing enough information to the principal. The principal then isn't relaying information back to the teachers, right? So even yesterday, I dealt with a situation with a student, and it was a fantastic, like, the kid has been kind of 3 different times he has had to come to my office for things. And finally it was like, okay, I'm going to get control of this. I'm going to call a parent. I did all my responsibilities and I was very supportive of the teacher. I got an email saying, whatever happened to this kid, what consequences are they going to, blah, 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 blah. And I got irritated by the email. And then I suddenly realized I didn't close the communication loop. I didn't go back to them and say, here's all that I did. And it wasn't because I didn't want to. It wasn't because I just forgot to do it. I solved the thing, and as he was walking out with his parents, something else came up, and so I went and dealt with that. But that's a huge deal. Like, you send that communication loop, and they see you supported me, you worked with the kid, we have a plan. Okay. So I think a lot of that is one of the reasons why we have this mistrust, is because nobody really knows what to do. We all want to do the same thing, even if we have the same values and the same perspective. If we don't know how to do them in this cog of education, we break down. And then, so I'm leading into one of my, because you didn't even let me speak at all about what I brought to the table. This has been the Kasey Schurtz show.
I do want to defend you. Do you want me to do that for a little while?
For a minute.
Should I do that now?
Me or the position? Because if it's
the position mostly. You are indefensible. You made me think about something that was so one of the things, and I think it's been sad, and I think sometimes when you have a big personality, so that principal I've talked about he was my best boss for a while, and then sadly wasn't. But he's a big personality, and you can even, like, the legacy of him continues. And one of the things he would famously say is, as soon as you send a kid to me, you've handed your problem over to me. So now whatever happens is up to me, and I don't need to, like.
And I don't disagree with that at all. I honestly don't. Like, I think we can have. So here's my. Let me kind of flesh this out. Maybe we can get into a little bit of a discussion here. When you send a child to me, we should have a system in place that we all know what's going to happen. You should not be shocked by what I do, right? You should not be shocked by the decisions that we make, because we've had discussions prior of, this is our system, this is how we process, this is our tiers of interventions and our tiers of behavior modifications. But I also, when you send the child to me, you're saying, I can't deal with it, you go deal with it. Okay, I'm going to trust that you've done what you can. And you're going to trust that I'm going to do now what I think is best for the student. I don't like when I am told or criticized or questioned in the decisions that I make. I don't, because you handed the problem to me.
Yeah. So here's, I ask you this. What if your perspective is, when that teacher sends you that kid, what they're really saying is, I need help, and right now I don't have the emotional restraint to wait.
So I did not complete the communication circle with my teacher yesterday. If I get a student with 0 communication, that's the same, right? So if a teacher sends it to me, and I have a couple teachers who send me a student, and I will not, our practice here in North Middle School is, no matter what I think about the situation, I will not send a child back during that same hour. They will not go back. Right? Yeah. That's not going to happen. They can be in class, the very next class, and there might appear to be no consequence, but I now need time to figure out what's going on. But at least this teacher. But if a teacher just comes to me and says, his behaviors aren't awful, he's not being a terrible kid, I just don't have the patience today, can you just take the kid? Sure. All right, fine. No problem. So, but that's a communication piece.
Yeah. So 2 things. I mean, there is a viral principal who will say something like, I don't ask my teachers to write up what happened right away. We can figure that out later, which I get it. And teachers love hearing that they don't have to write a detailed report. But if you're not doing that, how do we know what to do? Also, if that's too much work for you, then you're probably having too many problems and you need help with classroom management. So I don't love that conversation.
I agree with that.
But here's my question. So first of all, does your entire staff know that that kid who got sit down will probably get to go to the next class?
Yeah.
That's clear?
Yes, we've said we will keep them for that class. Now, again, we had to do this, and I was shocked. I have a building full of very seasoned teachers, and when I started this tier 1, tier 2, tier 3 conversations, one of my most seasoned, probably one of the best teachers, I said, I was kind of like, my brow furrowed a little bit, like, what is the problem? She's like, Brian, we've never heard this. We've never talked about this in our building before. In all of my years, we've never talked about tier 1, tier 2. Like, we've had some
Yeah.
similar language, but we've never done this. And so that to me was a huge indication that we don't have clear systems. So when we created this
Clear what?
art,
Clear what?
something in my throat. We don't have clear systems. And I am always, when I provide the system or when we come up with the system, I'm the advocate for saying, guys, don't tie me to this. There has to be gray where I can move around, but you need to know this is what we're working from. So yes, to your point, they now know we have clearly defined. If it's moved into tier 2, we'll intervene. If it's a tier 1 problem that's in your class, they will be in the very next class.
And as long as the staff knows that, which I think that maybe isn't true in all buildings. Two of the principals who I respect the most, actually, let me say this differently. One principal I respect a lot, and the other one I have a podcast with, have both said, no, that one of the first things that they did was to define tiers of behavior, and that had a profound impact on their staff. So principals out there, if you take nothing else from this episode, do that, because it does have a pretty big impact on what the staff sees and feels and believes and understands. It's a great way to communicate, and that way people know what to expect. I do want to spend a little bit of time defending the position, because here's one of the things that I think maybe staff, teachers don't truly understand, which is there is a real paradox in being a principal. The first one is being a manager versus being a leader. Right. And if you think about, and my guess is that today, as much as ever, maybe more than ever, the amount of time a principal has to spend managing building and grounds, managing safety and security issues, managing technical processes, serving as a gatekeeper, if you will, deciding, what we want to let in from the outside, what we don't. The list goes on and on. And for a principal, you really have to have the mind of both an engineer and an artist in order to do that well. And that's a pretty big ask. And I'm not sure if teachers really understand the demands and polls being placed on a principal every day.
So I appreciate that. And I appreciate that perspective of engineer and artist, because I would assume most principals were really good at one of those, and that's why they rose to becoming a principal. So I would say if I had to choose, I was the artist. So I'm really struggling with the engineering part. That's where I struggle. We have some principals in our district and in the country who are fantastic engineers. They get shit done, and they get it done efficiently and to perfection. And then they get into a position where they're asked to be an artist and they struggle. And so I do think that perspective is helpful, because even just that language, if you're a teacher or a principal and you're struggling with either being the principal or with your principal, define them a little bit. Are they the engineer or are they the artist? And if they have to be both, the best of best principals can be both, or they surround themselves with people who can help fill the gaps. But if you only have one principal and they're a fantastic engineer, maybe you're not acknowledging all the things that they're doing so well because they just don't affect your life, because he's just doing, or she's just doing that so well, but they're struggling with the artist part. And so if you can define that and see that, you can maybe give a little bit of grace, but you can begin to kind of help out and support that component, right? So I really appreciate you kind of defining it in that way, because that gives people an ability to kind of articulate what they're frustrated with and start to offer some supports or ideas to encourage that other component. That was really good. Thank you for that.
Yeah, and I think if you're a principal, whichever side you land on, the question you should ask your leadership team are probably about the things that you have less of a handle on.
So let me the celebrity principal, they're all artists.
I think they probably are.
They're not engineers, because engineers aren't sexy. Talking about systems, that's not sexy. Workshops, right? They're the ones that go around. The engineers are the ones that go around and provide workshops of systems. And here's what you do this. Here's how you do this. Here's how you do this. Which is probably why the kid whisperer, what's his name?
Scott Irwin.
Scott Irvin is so, or John Hattie or Todd Whitaker are so popular because they're both.
Yeah. Well, and like Scott, one of the things that he recognized right away is to surround himself with a few artists. I
Yeah.
mean, Jed Hafer is an artist,
Yes.
and those
Yes.
guys together.
He needs an engineer.
Yeah, yeah. It's so.
Can I add a piece to this? And then I know we need to start doing some solutions here.
Yeah.
I just want to add one piece, and this actually comes from. So I went to one of my more critical teachers, and I asked him if I can quote him. He said yes, and I said, he's most critical of just maybe life. He's very, very smart. He's very critical of education. He's very critical of even me in a positive way. Like he has no problems telling me when I do something that he thinks is dumb. He even like will be my heckler in a staff meeting, and I've learned that, and you know who I'm talking about. And I even kind of called him out on it. He's like, that's stuff that I say to you. And he's like, I know what I can heckle you about and it's appropriate and what I can't. He's like, I'm not going to cross the line. And I know that. But so I went to him and I said, hey, we're going to do this show. And this is the topic that was brought to the table. What do you think? And I was really, really shocked with his response because I thought it would be a very pointed finger pointing response. But it was an incredible, like, kind response. What he said was uneven, or not uneven. What's the word I want to look for? He says, I'll say this, his quote was, admin are not allowed to be honest. And I said, what does that mean? And he did have a faulty perspective where he feels like there's information coming from above that I'm not allowed to share. And I was like, I don't know if I agree with that at all. You might have experienced that, but I don't think I agree with that at all. That was one component. But his other one was, you're not allowed to share who you are because it will inevitably be used against you. So you can't be fully transparent in who you are. Now I am, to a fault, as a person. And he's right. The second he said it, I was like, yeah. And my transparency has gotten me in trouble. People have used it against me. And so he said that makes it an incredibly lonely place. And so you go around as a principal, or just me in general, and you want to hear the stories from your staff. That's how you lead them well and love them well. But you can't share your stories. So you're always like this distant person. And that builds resentment, or that builds a divide. And I just really appreciated that. And so maybe that's just I connected with that, but it leads me into the big thing that I want to talk about in terms of this division between staff and administrators. Have I chatted with you? I know I've written about it. Have I chatted with you about the empty boat effect?
I don't remember it. No, tell us more.
Let's say you're on a boat and you're going down a river and you're, flying, and there's a boat coming towards you. And you're kind of waving and asking it to kind of get out of your way, and it's not moving. And you start getting really angry, like, why is this boat coming right at me? Like, why aren't they turning to the right or to the left or whatever? And the whole time you see this impending collision and they're not moving, and you're waving and let's say you're honking a horn or doing all the things, and it's just not moving. And so you just get so frustrated with the person in the boat that they're not acknowledging you, they're not moving. So then you have to turn. And the second you go past the boat, you realize there's no driver. What happens to your anger? It all goes away. Why did your anger go away? Because you're not mad at the person. You're mad at the assumed intent of the person. And that applies to so many things. You talked about in all of your years, you've had 5 students that you've had issues with. I think that people are also on a bell curve. We have 10% of people that we work with that are just exceptional, amazing, always good people. We have 10% of people, staff and students, whose purpose is to destroy the world. The rest, 80%, are just doing the best they can with what they have. But we assume intent about students and teachers and administrators a lot. And that's what we get so worked up about. They do something we don't agree with. They do something that we don't understand. And what we oftentimes get most upset about is our assumed intent of why they did it, rather than going to the person and figuring it out. Even understanding we have different perspectives, but their intent was not to destroy. We disagree on how this goes, and we disagree on the process, but we are in agreement on the intent, which is to do what's best for people. And I think most of us have that.
And we do, as humans, have a tendency to presume malice, which is unfortunate.
Yeah.
But as humans, we also can kind of reason through that. I do want to, you talked a lot about something, and I'm going to mention it because I saw a name for it. You talked about how your staff wonders if maybe there's things that you're not telling them that are coming from above or that kind of thing. And I saw a name for that. It's called the principal policy puzzle. And largely what that is you as a principal.
Ps.
Yeah. You as a principal are, and
Don't
this is
brush
actually,
me off.
no, it was great. And this is actually This is principal ending in PLE because it's really talking about management in general. But I think it makes sense to end in the PAL, the principal's your pal, because a principal is being given a number of directives from above. And my guess is sometimes you don't even believe in those directives. Sometimes they go against what you want to do. And so now you find yourself in a position where you are trying to authentically lead your staff while at the same time being cautious to protect your position and your job. And
Or just do what you're told.
or just, yes, because it was a reasonable request made by a supervisor, right? And so to be authentic under those conditions and move a staff is pretty difficult. And I think that's some of what leads to the divide between staff and principals. I'm ready to talk about some solutions, though. Are you ready, or do you have any more divides you want to address?
I just want to keep talking about what divides us. I think that's healthy.
I think it's a good idea too.
Yeah. No, of course.
People should know their
What do you got?
place. Yeah. So the solutions are, and this has become my mantra. If I'm asked to describe my leadership style or my values, the solutions are to be clear, consistent, and compassionate. The solutions are making sure your staff knows what to do now, knows what to do next, and is willing.
Okay, but what if you have a principal who doesn't do that? And when you ask him to do that, or her, she gets frustrated. He gets frustrated.
Yeah, I really am placing the onus on the principal. The principal has to, because they have to. They have to.
But there's a reason why so many teachers love Principal Lamb, and it's because he's speaking to their culture. He's speaking to their building. I wish I had a principal like him. So they can't just go and fall in love with a what I think to be falsely worshipped principal. So what do you're a teacher. I mean, somebody brought this to you because they have a principal who's not doing this. What do they do?
Yeah, so here's what I would say. It still remains on the principal to figure that out. I think it's very easy to say the things the teacher wants you to say. And then you're like, oh, yeah, that's my guy. Real leadership requires saying things people don't want to hear, but making them believe in it anyway, or at least understanding the choice. And so when we talk about clarity, the now, I don't want to use these terms because they become worthless and artificial. So I'll go beyond it a little bit, but you do absolutely have to make clear the mission, vision, and values of the school. But again, because those terms lose their value, this addresses the core beliefs that are going to guide the work that is done. For example, I would make sure my staff knew that, hey, as principal, we're not going to punish kids, but you damn well better believe we will hold them accountable. There will be consequences, and the consequence will be those students will do the reasonable things we ask them to do, but we won't punish kids. That's got to be made clear. So,
I agree. What happens if your principal doesn't?
I mean, as the staff, this is when you go rogue.
So I'm going to use your language. I'm going to say, okay, so I'm putting myself in a teacher seat, and they have a principal who does not articulate mission, vision, and values. They have a principal who doesn't hold kids accountable. They have a principal who has 6 PLCs a day, and they're shitty. I still think the know what to do now is correct. And it reminds me a little bit of our gossip episode, where a bad principal will squash all gossip, and he will see it and she will see it as being undermining and disrespectful. And he might even give consequences to those teachers, or do the second period prep consequence to teachers who he or she knows is gossiping about him. But if you're a teacher and you're surrounded by gossip because you have a shitty principal, what you do now, we said gossip is good because it actually can refine the problem. If 7 or 8 teachers are talking about this thing, then you guys have actually identified this is a problem. So let's figure out what is let's boil it down to its specific. And then somebody has to go to the principal. Somebody has to make him aware, because that's what you do now. What you do next is, if nothing happens, you go again, you bring more people. But there is a hierarchy of go above your principal. Now, I'm not saying this will ever change. I know plenty of principals who union have risen up against them, and they've tried to get the principal held accountable, and nothing happens. But you have also experienced a principal who at some point they are held accountable. But also, it's just the right thing to do. And if you can do that, and you can go to your boss and you can go and say, here's the problems, here's where we're frustrated, and nothing happens, I think you have then 2 solutions. One is you ask permission. Well, we feel like this needs to happen. Will you allow us to do it? Can we create a system? Will you support us if we create the system? That's number one. You can maybe be the engineer to their artist. But then number 2, no one likes going to a place that's just shitty. No one likes going to a place that's filled with I shouldn't say no one, some people actually do like it. I don't like going to a place that's filled with gossip and slander, and all we do is talk about and highlight the problems. So I think if you're in that situation, you can maybe try and find a new school, but also just then close your door, which is the worst. Close your door and just say, "I can control my classroom, and that's what I'm gonna focus on."
No, I appreciate that. It's funny too because I'm thinking from the administrator position, despite my not being in a principal position right now, and you're thinking from the teacher perspective. So I'll enjoy the rest of the solutions as we do it in this way too. So first one again is be clear. So make sure teachers know what to do now, and that really does mean coming up with some common language and some common values that are truly known and understood. I think that consistency is required, and this is a lot of the next. And so this is where the systems matter, creating consistent processes and practices. And one reason this is important is because this builds trust. You'll be able to make the same choice again and again and again, following this system, following the process, and teachers will know what the outcome's going to be. And you'll be able to now say a lot of things that come true. This is how we
Which
do
is
things here.
funny, the same person who said say a lot of things that come true, Jed Hafer, also believed that there should not be a clear definition of if-thens when it comes to behaviors. He was an advocate that students should never know what you're gonna do. They
Yeah.
should never know that if I do this, this is gonna happen.
I think, and I understand that, but I think something will happen is the consistency, which actually I think is important for staff to know. So in maybe verbalizing that is what is important. Staff, I promise you, if a kid comes to my office, I
Something
will
will
do
happen.
something. Something will happen. And this is the important piece. I will let you know what that is.
Yeah, that's so hard.
Yeah.
It's so hard.
Well,
And
and that's why I wanted.
give, me it gives me grace towards teachers because I so struggle, and it's also just my mindset that like when a task is complete, it like leaves my mind,
Yeah.
right? I move on to the next thing, and so when I feel like I have this meeting with a kid or I have this meeting with a parent, and the task is complete, I walk off. I'm done, but it's not complete, and I struggle to complete the loop, and so it gives me grace to my teachers who I can get frustrated with of like you sent down this kid, but I have no idea why. Well, maybe they were busy. Give them some grace.
Yeah, and this is important. And the other thing is I don't think I think one thing that is true is we presume the systems will close that
Mm.
gap, but that's or close that circle, but that's not true either. I've shared a story about I was leading a PD and in the middle of it, it got derailed because there was a teacher who said I didn't do my job. I didn't follow up. And I had felt supremely confident that I had because I was a little thrown off. I was like, I followed up everything that we needed, that we talked about is in that student's file now, which you have access to. It's all right there. But I didn't send an email saying, hey, I finished the work. It's there. You know what I mean? And it's like, in my mind, the loop was closed. The work was in the place that we all agree we will look for that information.
I like what
But
you just said there. We assume the system. Well, you said like close the gap,
the loop, yeah.
but I think it's
Communication.
even beyond that. We assume the system will fix the problem.
Yeah. And what the system does is it allows for brevity. It allows for us moving through challenges much more quickly and efficiently. But some of the keys, such as communication, still have to happen. And that was something I just didn't quite have locked in. And I mean, that wasn't the place for this thing to come to a head. It derailed some important work we were doing. But on the other hand, there was a lesson for me to learn there, which is we expedited the process. Like we got the information where it needed to be. We didn't have to spend a lot of time looking for it. But I still need to say, hey, it's in the folder. Let me know if you need anything else. I didn't do it. Yeah. So making sure that we know the nows, like this is how we do business here. Knowing the next, here are the processes that are in place if we do have to respond to difficult tasks. And then the next two pieces are the willing parts. And this is why we have to be clear, consistent, and compassionate. People are willing to do the difficult work. They're willing to give you grace if there is trust and a belief, and that comes through being consistent in our relationship. So we have to trust, they have to trust us, and that comes through that consistency. But it also comes through us being intentional about trying to make sure we know and understand the needs of our staff. So we have to seek feedback. And I know that's hard. We brought this up recently in one of our episodes. But you need to, one way or another, know what is on the mind of your staff, know what they're thinking about. And I've said this repeatedly. We don't have to be afraid of feedback because there's only two outcomes. Either one, the feedback is wrong and we need to communicate better, or the feedback is right and we need to be better. No big deal. but we have to get
So
that feedback.
so again, I'm gonna look at this from a teacher perspective. Teachers need feedback, administration needs feedback. What happens? Because I agree with you, as people we're equal, as systems we're not. And so a principal who doesn't receive feedback, who takes everything as criticism, any advice or any question as a direct attack upon their person and their leadership, and they retaliate, they get angry, they gossip, all the negative things that a principal can do. What does a teacher do with that? How does a teacher handle a principal who stands up there, tells you what to do, doesn't support your kids, whatever it might be? And when you try to give, it's not even feedback, but just try and give like question, like, hey, what's going on? What am I supposed to do with kids? Or like, why are they back in my class? Even using your extreme example of going down to your principal and just saying, this kid is causing an unsafe environment, and the principal gets mad at them. And you have enough moxie and enough confidence that you can stand toe to toe. Many teachers don't. Especially, I'm going to be honest with you, if it's a female teacher to a male boss.
Yeah.
So
I've seen some of that in my role as one of my jobs is as an instructional coach, and I work in a field that is largely women, and I have seen that, and there's some rightfully earned distrust by men that we have to overcome. I would argue again that's why it is on the onus is on the principal to make sure that communication is happening, because you have to
agreed.
understand
But
that.
what if they're not doing it? What do I do if I'm the
Yeah.
teacher and
So
my
so
boss
he
sucks?
So here's a couple of things that I've thought about. First of all, any unsolicited advice is criticism. So if you
So you have pounded that into my brain so that now I will always ask teachers and parents, can I give you unsolicited advice? And that goes immensely better.
yeah, no, it's important. It was like the first lesson I learned in this job. I'm like, because you talk about me having moxie. I don't know. I'm probably just an arrogant douchebag. But one of the first things I did in this job was somebody said, hey, this teacher's struggling a little bit. I'm like, awesome, I'll go sit with him. And then I just started in on some of the things I noticed. That teacher didn't ask for that. And it didn't go well. And it took a
Yeah.
little while to kind of work through that. So that was a bummer. Here's what I would say.
I have a meeting in like 5 minutes.
Okay, we'll hurry this thing up. Here's what I would say. I was not good at this. I want to be better at it. Understand that the positions are a hierarchy, and you should show some deference to the position. That feels disgusting for me to say, but it is a fact. So if you genuinely need help, or you think the building or other people or colleagues or someone needs help, you have to just ask questions. You can't make statements. Go to the supervisor and say, hey, I'm noticing this thing. I don't know how to help people. What can we do? Is there something I can do? Do you have some thoughts? And then all of a sudden it's like you're just going to this person and you're saying, I entrust you and your opinions. And then it becomes their idea. I will tell you that it is one of the things that I've come to discover. If you can make other people think it's their idea, it goes a lot further. And one of the best ways to do that is to show some deference, to indicate that you respect their opinions, and to ask questions that will lead them down the right path.
We,
Feels manipulative, but
we do it with people all the time, and it's okay as long as the objective is true
yeah.
and right. I do need to be wrapping this up. I guess what I would ask, my big solution, which is just it's gonna feel very, very flat, but it is the true. I don't believe that even some of our worst behaved students want to be destructive. I think that they don't know any other way, and they are lost and confused. I do think that most principals want to be successful. They want to be liked, they want to be respected. And if they seem to have an inability to make hard decisions, I would venture, or I would suggest to a teacher, to assume that they don't want to be bad at their job. There's probably other factors in their life that are causing them to be very cautious. If nothing else, that just gives empathy. Doesn't make it right. Doesn't mean your job gets better. It just gives them empathy. And if there's a little bit of empathy, then we can start working with people rather than working against them.
What's the Michael Scott quote? I want people to be afraid of how much they like me.
Yes.
That's what principals want.
Yeah.
So I'm going to give one last solution. Despite all the things that are pulling on a principal, principals absolutely have to be instructional leaders. Instruction is what is happening in our schools most of the day. A principal has to be able to work with a teacher to talk through how to instruct in behaviors and in academics And so no matter all the things that are pulling on a principal, the principal has to set aside time to be an instructional leader. And if you cannot do that, I'm not sure that you can do the job unless you are surrounded with others who can be great instructional leaders.
I would
From
argue if you can be the instructional leader, you will solve a lot of these peripheral problems by being an instructional leader. If you have if you're teaching your teachers how to be strong pedagogically and all of the things, some of these other problems will kind of solve themselves through that very work. It is the work.
Yeah. And I've appreciated that about you when you talk about the way that you lead your staff, how much of that is as an instructional leader, which you are very qualified to be. So
Thank you. All right, let's do like rapid fire takeaways. I got to go, and I'm a minute late already, so very fast.
yeah. Yeah. So you talked about the accountability piece and how that's really what people are asking for is accountability across the board, students, staff, administrators. And I think that's really important. And we should create common language that focuses on accountability rather than things like consequences.
I love the engineer versus artist. I think that this gave some tangibility to the differences that we might and the frustrations we might have with people around us, especially our building leaders. They're probably either an artist or an engineer, and being able to articulate that means they're really, really good at that. And because they're really, really good at it, we no longer acknowledge it or appreciate it. We get used to it, and we struggle with what they're not. And so, if they're not the engineer, if they're not the artist, let's find ways to support them and benefit our students and our staff as a whole. All right, brother. Appreciate you. Love you. Till next week. Do great things.
Keep knocking.
See you, boss.
See ya.
Sorry, man. I gotta go.
Oh, you're good, man. See ya.